Mike Davis, the man tapped to be Trump's Attorney General if he wins in November, and later we'll be speaking to Rina Shah, Republican commentator and political strategist who has worked as a senior advisor in Congress. Mike Davis, thank you very much for joining us. Let's ask you first of all, what do you make of the trial? And how damaging do you think, you'll have heard Anthony Zurcher there perhaps, how damaging could it be to Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to be Trump's Attorney General. I've been trolling people, and I've made that very clear. I would say the fact that this woman you just had on, did you say that she was a porn star? And
no, I said she was an adult. I said she was an adult film star. She's a friend of Stormy Daniels, who you will have heard said that she was in the room that night. She was on the phone that night when Stormy Daniels called her and Donald Trump spoke to her. So she was commenting on how the trial was going. But I wonder how you think the trial is going.
Well, I think it's perfectly fitting that a porn star would be on your show and talking about a alleged sexual encounter that they were trying to arrange in 2006. This is complete and total nonsense. This is garbage. This is about trying to humiliate President Trump and to interfere in the 2024 presidential election. This alleged encounter that Stormy Daniels says happened was in 2006. There was a settlement of a nuisance claim and put in the books in 2017, and somehow that interfered in the election in 2016 with this 2017 accounting, and somehow that was a bookkeeping misdemeanor that President Trump's accountants booked in his books as a legal expense.
And this is all what's being debated in court. But you said on Fox News 2 weeks ago that the court's illegal. Clearly, there is an illegal, unconstitutional gag order here. Why do you think that's true? I mean, do you think any defendant should be able to speak out about the judge?
Yeah, in the United States of America, we have something called the Constitution, and we have the First Amendment and the Sixth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. And if there's anyone on the planet who should have the constitutional right to speak out against the judge, the prosecutor, their staffs, the witnesses, their biases, the process, it is a criminal defendant going through the criminal process. You don't gag criminal defendants in America. I don't know what you guys do in the United Kingdom, but in America, we have constitutional rights, and they've turned the Constitution on its head by gagging a criminal defendant, while this judge, whose adult daughter, Lauren Michon, is raising millions of dollars off of this case, requiring her recusal under New York statute, is allowing Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, a porn star who's raising money off this trial on her Penn Twitter profile, on her Penn tweet on Twitter, on X. And you have Michael Cohen, who's a disbarred attorney and a convicted perjurer, raising money on TikTok. And now you just had this bimbo porn star say that I
think calling a bimbo porn star is pretty offensive, and I'd like to ask you what you make of the trial in terms of the possibility that actually, in a way, that Donald Trump could benefit, certainly from his base, but benefit. Because you might have heard Anthony Zurcher saying that it is having an impact on the campaign, but it may not be a negative one.
You just had a bimbo porn star come out and accuse President Trump of trying to have a threesome with Stormy Daniels. This woman is so credible that the prosecutor doesn't want to call her in to be a witness. I mean,
let's just be quite clear. Let me just ask you a question. You think it is totally outlandish that Donald Trump would ever have a threesome? I just want to ask you that. Totally outlandish. It would never happen.
It's not relevant at all to this criminal prosecution. And that's the point of Stormy Daniels' testimony. Not only is it not relevant under Rule 401 of the Rules of Evidence, it is unfairly prejudicial under Rule 403. And the fact that this judge has President Trump gagged where he can't respond to Michael Cohen and he can't respond to Stormy Daniels and this bimbo porn star you just had on who made that malicious smear against President Trump, he can't respond to that or he goes to jail. That just proves what a kangaroo courts this is. This is Democrat lawfare and election interference. And frankly, the BBC should be ashamed of itself that you just put a bimbo porn star on.
I think we get the message. I think we get the message about how you're addressing her. And thank you very much for doing this.
What would you call her?
I would call her a woman who happens to be either a film star or she has a job. I don't think that you have any particular locus in this.
She definitely has a job.
Well, let's talk to Alana because she is still here. Do you think, Alana Davis, you think that Stormy Daniels ever regrets speaking out?
Absolutely not. In fact, I would imagine she was more frustrated that she had to sign a non-disclosure agreement in the first place that stopped her from speaking out.
In Trump's more ahead than he's ever been. Fewer people think January 6th was any kind of what it was, as an assault on the temple of democracy, our Constitution. I don't know whatever the you want to say. It's going the wrong way. It's not working. Everything that we're throwing is spaghetti at a wall, and none of it is sticking, me included. And it's hard when you start in your 80th year, and you know, like anybody else, I have an opinion of myself, and the opinion I've come to is I don't matter. It doesn't matter. You can prepare, you can be on TV, or you can write pieces, you can have a YouTube channel, you can have a podcast, and nothing. And, you know, we gotta try to think of something different, because what we're doing is really, really not working.
What we're doing is really, really not working. It is Friday, 10 May, year of our Lord 2024. Thank you for being here for the second hour of our late afternoon, early evening edition. We got Josh Hammer. Josh, you've got two amazing pieces up in Newsweek, one about the Uniparty, the other about us becoming a banana republic. I kind of teased your piece today when I had Scott Besson on, one of the smartest guys on capital markets, and we talked about what they're doing on the financial side, which Scott says, hey, look, reminds him of developing countries. He said, this is banana republic stuff, and I teased that we're going to have you on today. But I have to have you respond to, you have the BBC, the anchor for the BBC, supposedly the most prim and proper broadcast throughout the world, the kind of the lodestone or the platinum of what, you know, MSNBC and CBS and Edward R. Murrow and Walter Cronkite always aspired to and always informed by. And you have a anchor with the question, are you saying that Donald Trump would never want a threesome? And they have a porn star in there. And Mike Davis goes, what are you talking about? The anchor goes, you keep calling her a porn star. And Davis goes, well, what are you going to call it? He goes, a film star actress. Brother Josh, where are we in this world when BBC is promoting, that Trump, on a witness that was not called on something not relevant? The BBC in their prime time has on somebody that says that Donald Trump called him for a threesome. Your thoughts, sir?
You know, Steve, Mike Davis is a very good friend of mine, and I'm also now senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. So he's not just a friend, he's also my colleague. And, you know, I'm happy that we opened with that interview that he did with the BBC, because, I mean, I could not have said any better than Mike said there. I mean, what else to call this woman? She's a porn star bimbo. I mean, she is an adult film actress, a porn star, whatever. I mean, at some point, the words don't matter. This is someone who, you know, back in the old country, you know, my Jewish ancestors would say that they shtup for a living on camera. Like, they're literally copulating on camera. These are discredited, disgraceful people. These are blatantly unserious people. This is kind of the scum and the filth of society. And I mean, not to put too fine of a point on it. And you're totally right. I mean, I lived in London for about 3 to 6 months or so. I actually had a great time there. I think it was before all the mass Islamic immigration ruined that city. I'm kind of scared to go back to it. It's been 15 years. I had a great time there. I'm not so sure I'd have the same experience today, but I remember back when I lived there, British people talked a big game about the BBC. The BBC is the gold standard there. I mean, and look at this stuff. So it's really unbelievable, but it does just underscore, bringing it back home here, how ridiculous the narrative is, how ridiculous the plot line in the United States of America and the Western world is in the year 2024. Steve, there are major issues facing the United States of America. I don't have to be the one to tell you. You cover it every day, obviously. You have a very informed audience. They're well aware of what's going on out there. We have regimes all around the world that are doing lots of stuff that are hostile to American interests. The southern border is a complete and utter disaster. It is artificially suppressing working class wages. Illegal alien crime is the worst it's ever been. We have an unprecedented lawfare crisis. We have increasing depression, anxiety, childlessness, decreasing church attendance, and godlessness. Things are not going well. And there are a lot of issues out there, and the American people deserve something remotely approximating a normal presidential election year, where you have two people who can go up there, and the challenger to the decrepit, debilitating, doddering incumbent can get up there and challenge his policies, and then get on the campaign trail and rile up the crowd, as Donald Trump is very good at doing, and make the argument against the horrific policies of the incumbent. That is what the American people deserve. They are not getting it because Donald Trump is physically chained to this dingy courtroom in downtown New York City 4 days of the week. Wednesday is the only weekday that he can get out to actually be on the campaign trail. So they're physically depriving the voters of the actual argument that they deserve, all in the name of this ridiculous, legally incompetent case for at least 5 different reasons. There's a glaring statute of limitations problem here. A local prosecutor is trying to bring federal charges on campaign finance violation, dubious at best whether he can even do that. And then you're bringing in a porn star, a convicted felon, Michael Cohen. Steve, I mean, I've just had it. I mean, that's why I just had to write this column. I mean, this is truly third world, sub-Saharan Africa, banana republic stuff.
Okay, and I'm going to get to that, but I loved your first piece too. The reason I played the Carvel is that, and we're outgunned. We're on streaming services, we have podcasts, we're on radio, but they have all the institutions, they have all the federal power, they've got the uniparty, they have all media, all our cultural. And yet you hear Carvel going, it ain't working. I mean, it ain't. In fact, let me show you another one. Do we have the clip? I want to show the polling clip, the MSNBC meltdown on the CNN poll, if we can play that for Josh right now.
Interesting in this polling was more independents said that they worry about President Biden weakening democracy than Trump, 53% to 42%. What do you make of this?
I find it shocking, honestly. I can't, make sense of that number. I wish I could. I wish I had some really great insight to it. But I don't know if it's an outlier or not, because the other numbers with independents and Biden are going in the right direction. So that may be it. But also, just one thing I wanted to add on to what Basil said. This trial's not on TV. You guys do a great job reporting what's happening. But if there aren't those images coming out of the courthouse, people feel like they know this story.
So they're the whole case for democracy, that Trump is this it's autocrat. We're heading to autocracy because Josh Hammer and Bannon and all these other media guys are pushing this and fighting the will of people. You see in the polling, it's not sticking. Part of the reason is what Mike Davis did on BBC. Mike Davis on BBC hit him in the mouth with a full punch. He wasn't just going to let the BBC anchor sit there and frame it their way. When you fight back, you get that poll. When you fight back, you get the meltdown on MSNBC. When you fight back, you got Carvel, who's a very smart guy, particularly about politics and retail politics and delivering votes, in a full and complete meltdown, Josh, 6 months before Election Day, but about 4.5 months before we actually start voting. Your thoughts?
So this poll that we just saw and we watched the MSNBC reaction to it, it actually takes me back to an event that I did in New York City a few weeks ago. So there's an outlet called Tangle. They do this daily newsletter. They try to be a nonpartisan, across the spectrum thing. It's actually very similar to what Newsweek Opinion was doing when I was the op-ed editor there for 3 years, and we're still doing that today under Batia's leadership as well. So anyway, so I flew to New York for this Tangle event where they wanted one conservative, one liberal, and one, I guess, libertarian on stage. I was the conservative, obviously. And the liberal liberal was the Washington Post columnist by the name of Catherine Rampell, I believe was her name. And she's up there and, there's probably about 200 people in the audience or so. And she's trying to make the argument that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy. Basically, this poll that we just saw the MSNBC reaction to. And I turned to her and I said, can you answer me one very simple question? Which of the two major candidates for president right now is literally prosecuting and trying to throw in jail the other guy? Because it's probably not the one that you think it is. And, she has no answer for that because no one can answer that question. You want to talk about democracy, Steve. I mean, that was the poll that the MSNBC people just reacted to there. One of these guys, as we just discussed, is taking the political opposition off the campaign trail 4 of the 5 weekdays of the week in an attempt to throw him in jail before November. They tried to remove him from the ballot in this absurd case from Colorado that thankfully lost 9-0 at the U.S. Supreme Court. Hard to get much more anti-democratic than that, literally trying to deprive the guy of ballot access, a former president of the United States, for goodness sake. But you have to punch back here. And Jimmy Carville, to his credit, you're totally right. He actually is historically one of the more reasonable, sane liberals. He's not a huge fan of all the woke identity politics stuff, the oppressors, the press, critical race theory, any of that. So if even Jimmy Carville is recognizing that there is a problem here, that is a golden opportunity for Republicans this fall to kind of hit them where it's going to hurt, which is you try to make inroads with the Democratic coalition. You try to peel away more of those millennial Gen Z voters, more of those black voters. I mean, you really need to peel in, Steve, to the remaining white working class voters in the Rust Belt, many of whom actually are still registered Democrats. It goes back to kind of the 1970s, 1980s. A lot of them are instinctual Trump voters. They're still registered Democrats. These are all the various places where Republicans, I think, have a golden opportunity given the horrific policies of this current president, Joe Biden.
So, Josh, you are, I think, one of our leading, and I think it's pretty much consensus, one of our leading public intellectuals. I want to go through both pieces and we can put them individually. I want to take the uniparty piece first, and then I want to go to the Banana Republic because I think they're kind of inextricably linked. Let's take your first piece and walk us through it.
Yeah, so tyranny of the uniparty. I wrote this essay in response to this long essay that was written by Glenn Elmers and Ted Richards. They're both Claremont Institute folks, and they took a classic essay that was written probably 40, 50 years ago or so, which has 6 factors that identify that whether or not you are in a totalitarian regime. And in this essay, Glenn and Ted basically argued that, yes, under this classical definition of what it means to be a totalitarian regime, America in the year 2024 qualifies. And I thought they made a very sound argument. So what I was doing was responding to one very specific element of those 6 elements there, which was this notion of a uniparty. So one of the classic identifying traits of an authoritarian or totalitarian regime is you only have one political party. I mean, Nazi Germany is obviously a good example. There's plenty of other examples throughout the past 200 years of history. And what I basically argued in this essay is that America in the year 2024, whether we realize it or not, actually does have only one party, which is this idea of a uniparty. Sure, on paper, we technically have a Democratic Party, we technically have a Republican Party, but they are two sides of the exact same coin. They are two sides of the exact same liberal coin. You have left liberals and you have right liberals. They're ultimately operating within the same paradigm. And to put some teeth on that and to put some concrete terms on it, they are both operating in a foreign policy mentality that believes that America has a moralistic need, desire, and a frankly kind of an indispensable intrinsic desire to go ahead throughout the world as toppling regimes in the name of global peace, freedom. It's kind of this Bush second inaugural address, January 2005-esque mentality that has tangible ramifications for the war in Ukraine, which I've been a skeptic of basically since the get-go for at least 2 years now. On the domestic front, both parties are spending like absolute drunk sailors. They have no inclination whatsoever to trim the sails of the administrative state whatsoever, which is an existential threat to individual liberty and constitutional separation of powers. They are all in for all sorts of horrific causes there. And every time that you see someone, Donald Trump being a good example, J.D. Vance, Josh Hawley, folks like this, who come from fairly elite backgrounds. I mean, Josh Hawley and J.D. Vance both went to Yale Law School. Donald Trump obviously grew up wealthy, went to an Ivy League school himself. When you have people who are class traitors, that's the word that I used in the concluding paragraph of that essay. When you have people who are class traitors, who come from the upper echelons of society, whether it is their upbringing or whether it is their institutions, their degrees, their credentials, and then they turn on the ruling class and they come to identify with what the late, great Angelo Codevilla called the country free class, the people, what Hillary Clinton called the deplorables. When you have these class traitors that turn on the ruling class and become a voice, a paean, a tribune of the people, that is the unique threat. And Donald Trump, in many ways, obviously, is that threat, Steve. That's why they feel such a need to take him out.
Then it's absolutely brilliant piece. I want to make sure Grace, Mo, Carly Bonet over at Midnight Rider, if we can get an assist from the great Carly Bonet and the folks over there. Also, Elizabeth and our Telegram. I want to push this out everywhere. It's a must read, as Josh's material is. Then you pivot, and it actually gets even darker in your second piece, I think. That you talk about us becoming, the United States of America becoming a banana republic. We talked about it a little bit in the morning show about financially, how we're definitely doing between the Fed and Treasury. As Scott Besson said, he's seeing things that are only done in developing nations. Walk us through this essay, sir.
So the New York City case, Steve, I mean, as we heard Mike talk about on the BBC there a little bit, and, you know, as I've been talking about and you've been talking about, this New York City case is just orders of magnitude insane. So obviously there's 4 criminal prosecutions against Donald Trump. They are all legally deficient for various reasons. They are obviously all coming from a grossly politicized election interference vantage point here. The New York City case is a particularly extreme example of a case that anyone who has any sense of the law, any person who went to law school and becomes a prosecutor, if you have a morsel of integrity in your bones, you would never, ever bring this particular suit. And in fact, Alvin Bragg, who is obviously a George Soros-funded hack who literally campaigns for office to be the New York County, New York District Attorney, he literally campaigned on a platform of getting Trump and prosecuting Trump by any means necessary. His own predecessor, Cy Vance Jr., who's a pretty liberal guy himself, very much looked into this charge and ultimately said, no, this is too frivolous. I can't justify using prosecutorial resources to do it. Same thing for the federal prosecutor's office there, the SDNY, the Southern District of New York. They did the exact same thing. Alvin Bragg has no such compunctions because he's a Soros-funded hack. So, okay. So their theory of the case is basically that these $130,000 in payments from the Trump Organization to Michael Cohen on the eve of the 2016 election were incorrectly put in the accounting books, in the ledgers of the Trump Organization's accounting books and whatnot, because they called them legal services, when it should be a campaign finance violation. Okay, so there's multiple problems here. One is the fraudulent bookkeeping charge, the actual state crime, has a 2-year statute of limitations. Now, Alvin Bragg tries to get around this very clear-cut statute of limitations by tacking on this in furtherance of an additional crime. That's the federal campaign finance violation thing. However, he's a local DA. I mean, what gives Alvin Bragg the right to even tack on a federal crime to begin with, especially when the own federal prosecutor's office looked into it and said that they weren't going to do it? Then that has its own statute of limitations problem as well here. But in order to prove this case, Steve, in order to prove this case, as even the Bill Clinton nominated FEC Federal Election Commissioner Brad Smith has explained, in order to prove this case, in order to prove any campaign finance violation case, you have to prove that the sole and exclusive motive for a payment was unambiguously for the sole and exclusive reason of getting that candidate across the finish line. In other words, if Trump and his lawyers can show that there was any other possible motive for this payment that was made from the Trump Organization to Michael Cohen, any motive whatsoever, they win the case because the prosecution has not met anywhere close to its beyond a reasonable doubt burden. And, you know, I can think of any number of other reasons why maybe these payments were made. You know, perhaps President Trump didn't want Barron Trump to find out. Maybe he wanted to do it to preserve the integrity of his marriage with the First Lady, Melania Trump. I mean, there are so many other reasons why maybe these payments were made in the first place. And then obviously, kind of the most important point, which we discussed a little bit earlier, is just the grand spectacle of it all. The fact that the president is in the courtroom 4 days a week. He's not on the campaign trail. They're trying to incarcerate the political opposition. This unconstitutional gag order, the judge is openly threatening to throw him in jail because these $1,000 fines, in his estimation, are not having a sufficient deterrent effect. Trump can't even criticize the daughter of the judge, who's raising $90+ million for her crappy company, Authentic Campaigns, which is just a Democratic fundraising consultancy firm. Trump can't push back against the porn star Stormy Daniels herself. It just stinks to high heaven. I don't really, it just purely stinks.
It's pure banana republic. Before we go, we know you got to bounce. Question: should President Trump, I've been arguing, call the bluff of the judge and the gag order, even if it means to go to jail? Would you recommend to Trump, if you were on the legal team or the political team, to press the case on the gag order and get even more up in the court's face, sir?
If I was his lawyer, and I as a political commentator, yes, I would love to see that. If I was literally his lawyer in the courtroom, hard to say. But I mean, my heart totally agrees with you. I'm trying to think about my legal brain as well, honestly. But he should. I mean, like, he definitely should, because he's clearly bluffing. There's no way Merchan's going to do that, Steve.
You don't think Merchan is? If Trump calls his bluff, you think he backs down? I
do think that. I actually do think he's bluffing on that.
Josh Hammer, you're one of the smartest guys I know. Josh, how do we get to all your writing, not just on Newsweek, but your podcast, all of it, sir?
Yeah, thank you so much, as always, Steve. So I'm on X, Josh_Hammer, Instagram, Josh B. Hammer. I write a weekly syndicated column that goes up in Newsweek and a bunch of other Right of Center websites. I got two of my own shows. One is the Josh Hammer Show, and then the other, which is the more lawfare focused show, is America on Trial with Josh Hammer, both available everywhere you get your podcasts.
And keep taking the fight to folks like in platforms like Tangle. We need that. We need it taken to the other side. That's how you have Carvel meltdown. Josh Hammer, fantastic. Thank you. On a Friday.
Thank you, Steve.
Early on a Friday evening in May. Okay, we're going to pivot in a second. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, Ukraine, but much, much more, as Ben Harnwell joins us. Okay, this is a fourth turning. What I mean about that, just like the Revolution, the Civil War, the Great Depression, and World War II, the United States is going through about every 1,800 years a major transformation. Things seem like they're upside down, but in the book of Ecclesiastes, they say these things are going to happen. But you need to look for stability, particularly in your finances. Birchgold.com/Bannon. Go there today. Talk to Philip Patrick and team. Philip's going to be with us tomorrow on the show. But you can go get the End of the Dollar Empire free. Do it today.
All this nonsense, all this spin, they can't handle the truth.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
You see what I mean? If Laszlo's presence in a cafe can inspire this unfortunate demonstration, what more will his presence in Casablanca bring on? I advise that this place be shut up at once.
But everybody's having such a good time.
Yes, much too good a time. The place is to be closed.
But I've no excuse to close it.
Find one.
Santé, monsieur.
Everybody is to leave here immediately. This cafe is closed until further notice. Clear the room at once.
How can he close me up? On what ground?
I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here.
You're winning, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Everybody out at once.
Okay, welcome back. A classic scene from one of the great classics, Casablanca. Michael Curtiz, one of the greatest directors ever, Hungarian. Ben Harnwell, why is that appropriate for what we're going to talk about, sir?
Steve, we play that clip so often on the War Room, we might as well substitute it for the opening credits of the show. Steve, prepared to put your shocked face on, because there are more stories coming of corruption out of Ukraine. And it's very topical. We're going to come to a development from a couple of hours to go. But let's first dig down on we've got a whole stack of corruption stories coming out of Ukraine. So first off, one of President Zelensky's members of parliament in the Seventh of the People's Party, this is a guy called Andrei Klochko. He's been hauled in before the Ukraine specialized anti-corruption prosecutor's office because he had around 270,000 worth of income that he couldn't explain on his parliamentary salary. And I know I'm going to recite this now, Steve, because it sounds a little bit like the 12 days of Christmas. But according to the corruption office, he had 5 flats in Kiev, 3 plots of land, 2 other premises, a Tesla and a Mercedes-Benz. Nothing about a partridge in a pear tree, but it's almost getting there. Now, the thing about this that most surprised me was that these developments were tied to another corruption sacking, and this time it's the head of the cybersecurity office of the SBU, Ukraine's CIA, basically. Why this is important, and I'm going to tie this together, is because it's the intelligence services whose hand is behind a lot of these corruption allegations, and this is a director within the intelligence services. Now, this guy had been dismissed last week because of sort of backhanders being filtered in through his wife. So basically, this is a question that the very people that are being entrusted to tamper down, supposedly, Steve, shocked that there's corruption going on in here. The very people who are being entrusted to tamper down on corruption are those people who are taking the largest backhanders. How do we know this? Because we covered this on the show a couple of weeks ago, but it's always worth repeating. This Anglo-German businessman called Arnulf Damoral, who's the 10th largest taxpayer in Ukraine, he had an issue where members from, and this is the FT, the Financial Times, okay, and I quote them directly, members from Zelensky's administration and the country's secret services were filmed by this Anglo-German businessman in Vienna, tapping him for a proportion of his company to be held in an offshore trust. Steve, how much were they hitting him for? Because we always called President Zelensky 10% ski, right? Because that's like the standard, as it is in Russia, that's like the standard kickback. These guys wanted an eye-watering 50%. Now, the reason...
But hang on, just for the audience, let's not bury the lead. I just want to hit rewind for a second. And this is why the Casablanca clip that we play a lot is so important here. Remember, we'll get to in a second, they're actually, and I'm not making this up, folks, the $61 billion is not good enough. They're ramming through another $400 million, another supplemental to come like ASAP. Let's go back. The intelligence, Mike Johnson tells us that the reason that they've put this forward so quickly in the $61 billion, MTG informs us that although they agreed to forensic audits, they agreed to audits. As you reported, Ben Harnwell, I think it's Burns, the CIA director, flew to Kiev to have a sit down with Zelensky and his top guys, say, the corruption, you're stealing with both hands, so obvious and so blatant that we're not going to be able to protect you on Capitol Hill because now everybody, and I talked to so many people about these stories, it is an open secret in the capital city of the United States about how much money is being stolen by these corrupt oligarchs. It's the intelligence guys that are in there. It's the intelligence community that's captured little Mike Johnson, Polly Pockets, and has him wetting himself about all the things that are going to happen, that Putin's going to roll across the North German plain into Poland, that Putin's going to go into Germany, that Putin is like the von Moltke plan and the Guns of August. He's going to be heading to Paris, and we're going to have a second Verdun, right, to stop him at the Marne River. All of that. It's the intelligence services, and not only are they working together, they're stealing together. Ben Harnwell.
I couldn't put it better, Steve. Not only are they working together, they are stealing together. That is the literal truth of this. I just want to follow on because, look, in a regime, this is like in China. When someone is sacked in China for high-level corruption, they have execution for this in China. And yet the whole regime has its hand in the till. So what is clearly the case, and of course, the One Belt, One Road initiative is, under a certain perspective, just a massive opportunity for institutional grift at the highest level in which everyone is participating. So what happens in China, when you hear about in the story, in the newspapers, it occasionally happens that someone's been dragged off, they've been put in prison, or they've been executed for corruption. It's really because they've fallen out with the regime. And the regime wanted to get rid of them. And corruption is obviously a great excuse before their own people to be using, because, of course, it looks as if they're drilling down on it. And I would suggest that the same dynamic is taking place in Ukraine, because they are all of this herd of pigs has its snout in the trough. When you hear, for example, like yesterday, when the Ukrainian parliament dismissed Mykola Salisky, who was the agriculture minister, who couldn't justify about $10 million worth of land acquisition on his ministerial salary. When you hear of people sort of falling out of grace like this, it's really because of internal dynamics and internal power plays. Just coming back to something that we did hit yesterday on the show. in the latest, the Ukrainian parliament in a second reading yesterday approved a bill which has yet to be signed by President Zelensky, where they can draft convicts in prison to the front line. I just want to hit this point again because we did hit this yesterday. Very important here. When they were drafting this bill, they put in a carve out specifically exempting whom from the mobilization.
You're
people.
Hold it. Harnwell's doing this. We covered this yesterday. I did want to cover it today. But folks, you got to understand something. The way Harnwell knows how to troll me better than anybody. He knows this will trigger me. But go ahead, wait for it. Tell me who they exempt. Hang on. This is a group that actually had their two most revered generals cashiered because they talked about the lack of manpower. It's not the lack of weapons. It's the 500,000 troops at about 27 years old they need, not 42 years old. Of course, they go through all these perturbations, and they're going to draft prisoners. They're going to put the poor guys that have already lost limbs back to the front, everybody, because the parents are getting guys out of the country. But they have this big thing. And what are the one group that they put in as an exemption as they push this, they push the new draft through the Zelensky's legislature?
Steve, I can only quote, former high-ranking officials who held important political positions and were convicted of serious corruption. That's basically any potential Ukrainian cabinet minister or any potential Ukrainian member of parliament would fall in that category if they got their hands caught in the till. So as they're drafting and mobilizing basically everyone else, and now they're press ganging people. I saw something today for 3 days just on the streets in an intimidation effort to try and get them to go to the front line. The one category of prisoner, there's a second category, right? There's a serious murderers who've killed more than 2 people. But the one category that they... More than two. But the one category that's got the carve out here from the latest mobilization drive are basically parliament corrupt Ukrainian officials. Absolutely astonishing. And of course, that really has to be.
Hang on. But I want to go to something. I want to go back. Because we talk about rational actors, like we talk about the invasion of the southern border. The rational actors are the people coming across the border because they realize it's a one-time good deal under Biden, and the cartels, which are making more money than ever. The rational actors, the most rational actors that are looking reality in the eye and acting upon it are the parents of particularly young Ukrainian men. It's men and women, but particularly young Ukrainian men that are sitting there going, hang on for a second. These Americans are financing this entirely corrupt regime because those people are patriotic. The Ukrainian people are very patriotic. They love their country, right? But they understand what's going on now. And they see what the grift is and what's happening. And they look around and they say, because if this is really about defending their country, if this is really about Ukraine, those people being patriotic would have their young sons at the front, would have their young sons going into the military. They don't. The biggest problem they have is the manpower. And that's on Capitol Hill. They don't want to talk about why. The parents are doing anything possible. In fact, I think you report the other day, the average pay is like $650 to $900, $950 for an average Ukrainian. They're paying $5,000 to $10,000 to get them out of the country and to get them to Ireland or to get them to Hungary or to get them to Poland, to get them out of the country and to get them out of the ability of Zelensky and these people to basically press gang them. And this is because they understand that this is not about the defense of Ukraine. This is not about their country. This is something more. And they see the corruption all around them. They say, hey, look, if my son has got to go serve his country and die in service of the country, that's one thing. But if they're going to take my son and send him to the front lines to support this, to hell with it, right? I'll go into hock. I'll go into bankruptcy. I will do whatever it needs to be done to get my boy out of this country. Ben Harnwell.
Well, look, we're going to talk around neighbouring countries in a moment, and I'll queue up Denver now. We'll go for the footage on the Polish farmer protests in a moment, because that has a strong Ukrainian dynamic in it. But the horror of what you're saying, Steve, about the parents basically selling the farm, as it were, to get their kids, their sons, out of Ukraine and away from the firing line, is that the neighboring countries, for example, Lithuania, are rounding these kids up and they're going to send them back. Right? And the astonishing thing is, we're under an invasion, capital letters, an invasion of third world illegals across the European continent for the last 6 or 7 years, and you can't send people back to war zones, right? This is what we've been told. We've been hit over the head with this. You can't send refugees back to war zones, but you can if it will help to stop Trump. That's the cynicism, Steve, the utter evilness of these people, because they're going to take these kids, as you said, the parents have sold the farm to get their kids out. We're going to round them up and send them back. Why? Yep. Because Europe has been cajoled by Washington, D.C., to give Joe Biden a foreign policy victory before November.
Let's talk about the Polish farmers and link that back to what's happening in Ukraine.
Okay. Can I cue now the footage?
Sure.
And I will talk over this if Denver's very kindly able to play this. So thousands of Polish farmers have gathered. Now, according to some reports, Steve, they have actually occupied yesterday the Polish parliament, the lower house, the Sejm, because they were demanding to see the prime minister. In the event, they saw the speaker of the house, and both sides said they had a very productive meeting. But what specifically is the claim here of the Polish farmers, what has specifically got them angry, thank you very much, Denver, is a twofold issue here. There's the zero carbon aspect on behalf of the EU policies that have been pushed on agriculture, which we've spoken about so many times, the so-called Green Deal. And also the fact that unchecked products are coming out of Ukraine and flooding especially in the agricultural sector, and flooding the Polish domestic market. And this is creating massive social unrest in neighbouring Poland. So what's happening now, that for political motives that I was just touching on for a moment, this is creating shockwaves now right across continental Europe, because obviously these farmers' protests have been rolling on for the last 12 months or so. Well, we will see the consequences of this anger in less than a month's time in the European. It's almost exactly a month's time now, Steve. In the European elections.
This is spreading throughout. The farmers' revolt, although not all of it's tied to Ukraine, it's all tied to climate change. This farmers' revolt throughout Europe has been an agrarian populist add-on, or it's converging with the populist and the sovereignty movement. Tell me how deep-seated is it? This is all about this over-the-top crushing by the climate cult. How deep and how big is the agrarian revolt? We haven't quite seen it here in the United States. We're actually lagging on that. But you've seen the farmers who have obviously a history of millennia of being very productive farmers revolting about that. Your thoughts, Ben?
What I find most interesting about this, Steve, is there is a connection, a political connection between the farmers, the protests, the popular support behind these protests, and those political parties that the mainstream media sort of slur with the term far right and extreme right. There is a connection. And I would draw this parallel. The consequences of trying to impose radical green pseudo-Marxist policies on a country has the effect of driving ordinary non-political citizens into such a strong reaction against that, because it's hitting their own interests the hardest. It's actually making ordinary people self-identify as being far right. So astonishingly counterproductive if the European elites really are afraid, really are terrified, as they claim, that Europe is on the verge of being subsumed by the far right. These are the very people that not only have caused that to take place, but are continuing to cause it to take place. There's a hubris behind our sociopathic overlords and backed up with a pride that refuses to let them back down. And they are going to create the very phenomenon they claim to be most scared about.
They're not going to back down because they understand they have the power now. But like in The Godfather, right? We're gaining power. They want to hit them. They want to hit us while they're still strong. That's why they're coming after. And this is what's turning. Your point is so well taken. It hasn't spread. The farmer aspect has not spread yet to the United States, but you're going to see that. There's things happening all over the country about climate change and shutting down the farmers. Ben, we got to bounce. Where do people go? Your engagement over at Getter is, quite frankly, breathtaking. It's because of the amazing lead-ins you do to your pieces. Where do people go?
Thank you so much, Steve, for that kind comment. It's simply my social media platform of choice, Getter, and just tap in the search box my surname, Harnwell, and my feed will come up right at the top there.
It's not. I'm not saying it's nice. I'm insanely jealous. I'm all over the team here. Why is Harnwell got such engagement? I'm like some Schmendrick. Ben Harnwell, love you, brother. Thank you for staying
Steve.
up
Thanks
tonight.
So much. God bless.
Okay, Lou Dobbs is going to follow us. A couple things you see right there. The turbulence, European parliamentary elections, the sovereignty movement now engaged. Also, we have this populist agrarian revolt about farmers whose families have been doing this for millennia. The farmers of Europe are now in revolt. That's going to lead a right-wing movement in this European parliamentary elections in early June. We're obviously going to cover that wall to wall because we are the global platform for the sovereignty movement, the populist nationalist movement. Of course, the great Philip Patrick is going to join me tomorrow. Lou Dobbs is next tomorrow morning. Our Saturday show on fire. Philip Patrick, birchgold.com. Go check it out. Times of turbulence, you need a hedge financially. What has that hedge been for, 8,000 years of recorded history? It has been gold. Why is that? Talk to Philip Patrick and team. Ask the guys at Birch Gold. We give you the macro, they give you the micro. Go talk to them. birchgold.com/Bannon and download The End of the Dollar Empire. We called it years ago. We've been writing about it. It's all happening. It's happening now. The end of Bretton Woods, brought on by your elites. Two other things I want you to focus on. Number one, silent. Of course, with the expansion of FISA, just didn't kick it down the road. It expanded FISA dramatically. You need more than ever Silent, SLNT.com, silent.com, the Faraday bags for your iPad, your iPhone, your computer. Get them today. The best ever made. And of course, Patriot Mobile. Go check out Patriot Mobile. The heroes there, the Glenn Story and the team. What does Patriot Mobile give you? It gives you the best service you can get from all the carriers, but with a company that doesn't hate your values. Remember, you vote every day. That's why we're helping build up these companies on the alternative economy. So you don't have to depend upon just companies and corporations that hate you. Lou Dobbs is next. We are back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. live. We'll see you then in the War Room.